Hello chess friends, this is Video Master Valeri Lilov, and today what I'm going to show you is a very interesting theme of the positional chess and the strategy as a whole, and this is exactly the difference between the good and bad pieces. So I would like to show you the following game in which the team of good bishop against bad bishop is very obvious, and basically this is just one, of course, example of a good piece against bad piece and how can we use that advantage. So the game was played between the grandmasters Heine Nielsen and Eduardas Rozentalis in the Bundesliga tournament in 2001. So Grandmaster Heine Nielsen really managed to exploit the advantage of having a better piece than the opponents, and won in a very instructive way. So let me show you that game. White started with c4, and black played the move of knight f6. White continued with knight c3, the so-called English opening variation, and black played e6. The move of e6 is a very frequent way to avoid the main variations of the English opening as a whole. So black's idea now is, if white goes with something like g3, for example, black wants to play d5, and then there will be no English opening since black has the plan to continue with d4, and it will either be the ready, or if white plays d4, it will be the Queen's Gambit Catalan variation. So that's why e6 is a very interesting way. However, in the game, white played the move of knight f3, and black continued with bishop to b4. Now, with some kind of a transposition, black wants to enter into the Nimzo-Indian. So, for instance, if white plays d4 right now, black is having the simple move of c5 or castles, and we already have an initial position of the Nimzo-Indian variation. So, for this reason, bishop to b4 is a very interesting opportunity that allows black to exchange the knight on c3 and take some advantage on the queen side. And because of that idea, white decided to postpone a little bit the move of d2 to d4 in order to avoid the major variations of the Nimzo-Indian, and placed queen to c2. Now white's queen is actually having the control to the c3 square, and if black decides to capture there with his bishop, white will simply capture with the queen and gain the pair of bishops without any sufficient compensation from black. Now after queen c2, black made the simple castle, and white played a3, now forcing that bishop to take action. In fact, we see that it will be a kind of awkward option for black to play bishop c5 or bishop e7, because he will simply lose a couple of tempos. For this reason, after the move of a3 in the game, black decided to exchange. Bishop takes to c3, queen takes to c3, and now b6, providing b7 for development of his light square bishop. After b6, actually, white played e3, bishop to b7, and here the simple move of bishop to e2. Now white already got a little advantage from the endgame. This is from the opening. This is the pair of bishops that he will try to use, and possibly he will play b2 up to b3 or b2 up to b4 and introduce his dark square bishop on a very useful long diagonal a1 to h8. So this might be not so big advantage right here, because white's bishops are not really making so many threats, but in general I think that this is a long-term advantage. So literally white can begin a plan which will be associated with the idea to exchange pawns and open up the position. So sooner or later those pair of bishops will actually be useful for white, and he will manage to achieve an advantage because of them. So in the game, after bishop to e2, black played pawn up to d6, white castled, and black played knight e4. A very useful idea in a particular kind of scheme like this one for black is to use that he has two knights and eventually to try and set up a strong control in center. Because through having that strong control in center, he will keep the position locked, so white's bishops will not really attend so many threats or any kind of other possibilities. After knight e4, black wants to play knight d7 and possibly f5 within the next few moves. However, now we can see that white has 1 plus of his position, and this is exactly the d2 pawn. Literally, when he removes the queen, he will possibly be able to go with something like d2 up to d3 and create a threat to black's knight on e4. So this is one advantage to the different variations which are in the Nimzo-Indian when white has his pawn on d4. So he can now immediately threat on the black's knight on e4. So after knight e4, of course, white brought his queen back on c2, and black used a very interesting idea with knight g5. Now black wants to exchange white's kingside knight and definitely then open up his b7 bishop so that he can create some threats against his king. This is still theory actually. White simply took, black recaptured, and white played f3 defending against queen takes to g2, checkmate. Here, black expanded his control over the center by putting his pawn on e5. It seems that black is having a very solid position here. There are no particular weaknesses, especially white's dark square bishop on c1 is not making any role. He doesn't have any possibilities for progress from that spot. And black has put all of his pawns on the queen side and the center to dark squares so that his light square bishop can experience full potential on his diagonals. So it all seems very good, without a position without weaknesses for black. However, as I told in the beginning, the pair of bishops are always an advantage. They might be not so useful right now, but definitely on some later stage, white might be able to use them in order to control many squares and definitely to put some problems against black. After e5, white played d4, black exchanged e takes to d4, and e takes to d4. Now it was probably a better option for black to keep the pawns on e5 and d4, but I presume that black was a little bit afraid from something like e4 for white and d5, with which white can lock the center and then proceed with f4, which is a kind of typical idea on many occasions. So black's light square bishop will be pretty bad over there. So he decided at least to have an open file on which he can probably create some counterplay. Black played now the move of queen f6, directing an attack to d4 pawn, and white played the move of bishop to e3, defending the same pawn. So here it seems that black's position remains very good. In fact, he has the move of rook e8, attacking on white's bishop, which of course he chose. However, white played queen to d2. Now, what is this position? We are pretty close to finishing the opening stage for both sides. White already finished the opening stage by connecting his rooks together, and black just needs one more move to bring his knight out, and he'll have his rooks connected, so again the opening stage will be finished. What are the pluses and minuses in both sides? What are the pluses for white, and what are the pluses for black? The plus for white is that he has two bishops, the pair of bishops, which he can possibly use as an advantage. The plus for black is that he's having solid structure without particular weaknesses, so it will be a lot more difficult for white to attend any kind of immediate threats against black's position on a shorter amount of time. So what are the minuses in white's and black's positions? The minus that black has is that he's having a little bit more cramped position. We see that he has absolutely no piece on the 4 track in his territory, so he's just pressurized on the first 3 ranks from his own end. And white's minus, we can say, is that he has currently his bishops on really ineffective squares. However, if we just try to compare those pluses and minuses, we see that white's position is much preferable because his bishops will particularly be much better, no matter that they are currently ineffective. And most importantly, he has a lot of space advantage, so this will limit black's active opportunities for a really long time. So let's see how the game continued. White played the move of queen to d2, and black simply made the move d5. A move that I particularly don't like. Black is deciding to exchange those pawns, but we know that when more pawns are exchanged, white's bishops will of course become stronger and stronger and be able to support his plan in a much better way. After d5,